Back in the 1970s, Sarah Jane Smith, played by Elizabeth Sladen, was one of the most popular companions that has ever been shown on the televised series. Starring in the last series of the Third Doctor era with John Pertwee, and then continuing on with 2 series with the Fourth Doctor with Tom Baker, she has been described by many as one of, if not the greatest companion of all time. And when she left, there was still a huge fan appreciation for the actress and the companion. So much so that in the early 80s, there was actually an attempt to get her onto a spin-off with another fan favourite character, K9, played by John Leeson. This was in part created to try and boost up, Doctor Who's popularity at the time, and came out in the form of K9 and Company, a pilot episode that aired on Christmas, around about Christmas of its respected year. But sadly, due to it did do pretty well in the viewing figures, but because of changes that were made during the time in BBC's department, the show was never picked up, and it is considered by many as a failure. However, the canonicity of this story cannot be understated, as this story was the only time where we would see Sarah Jane meet K9, something which would continue on when she appeared in the 25th anniversary, The Five Doctors, the special Doctor Who anniversary, in which she appeared alongside Peter Davison's Doctor, and is also shown to have K9, basically stating that K9 and Company are canon to the Doctor Who canonically. But she was also, despite her very limited role in that story, she was still a very highly appreciated actress and character in the Doctor Who community. And so in 2006, during David Tennant's first series, the second series of the revived series, Elizabeth Sladen returned for a one-off story in School Reunion, which we've tackled all of these stories on this marathon series, along with John Leeson as K9. However, that episode, in terms of Sarah Jane Smith, was so popular, was so well received, that fans they insisted on a return, on a spin-off. And even though Torchwood would be officially the first spin-off of Doctor Who of the revived era, it was Sarah Jane Smith who had the first to be announced. But Russell T Davies had to work on 1 or 2 series. He decided he would put all of his efforts into Sarah Jane Smith, and leaving some of the department, most of the creative control, over to Chris Chibnall. The result, of course, is the Sarah Jane Adventures. Now, this is a spin-off that is released for the CBBC's channel, which is mostly focused on children's programs, a lot more lighter tone, lot less darker themes. It's mainly a kids show. And so with that, hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Sarah Jane Adventure episode, Invasion of the Bane, written by Gareth Roberts and Russell T Davies, and is also directed by Colin Teagues. This is an hour-long special which introduces all of our characters and all our themes and all that for the Sarah Jane Adventures. It is usually incorrectly described as a pilot. However, when the BBC picked it up, they also decided that they already picked up the entire first series. So calling this a pilot episode isn't exactly accurate. However, it is a very vital point in the Doctor Who canonically, because it's essentially a successful successor to K9 and Company. That is just absolutely mental. I also like how it does go for a much more kid-friendly audience. If think about it in terms of the scope of Doctor Who. You have the main series, which is a family-orientated show, a show which is targeted for everybody in the family. Then you have Torchwood, which is more targeted to a much more adult audience. There's swearing, there's language, there's violence. It tackles very hard-hitting drama and darker themes. And then you've got the Sarah Jane Adventures on the CBBC, which is all about just fun, having a nice time, and mainly it's just for kids. A lot of dialogue has been written in a way which a lot of younger audiences could find easy access to and understand what the characters are saying. There's not a lot of political talk or stuff like that, and so one might argue they've dumbed it down, but I think it's just writing for a different particular audience. Now, this story is also very unique in Sarah Jane Adventures, as it's the only one-parter. The Sarah Jane Adventures has built its series on each story being 2 episodes long, having a part 1 and part 2. Something which I would like to add, the main series of Doctor Who should be doing. Like, I know we had a series, I think it was series 8 or series 9 when Stephen Moffat did that, and a lot of people didn't like the stories on there, but the idea of a series of mostly 2-parters is something I feel like Doctor Who should be doing, because it develops more the landscapes and the characters. It gets introduced in individual stories. So I do kind of find it strange how Sarah Jane Smith got this format, this much more entwined with its classic Who roots, which for those of you who don't know, classic Doctor Who was usually built up. Each story was more than 1 episode, usually 4. Sometimes you would get a 6-parter. Some really rare you get 2, and that's just how the format was. You know, you would have a lot of cliffhangers, but each story is self-contained. It's just like self-contained in parts. Something as akin to film serials of the 1930s and 40s. So this adapts that format and also introduces one of Sarah Jane's greatest villains, the Bane, and it also introduces key characters which will be returning throughout the series. So before I get into the story, here's the official DVD, which it got in the complete first series box set, which is very nice. But also because this story was standalone on its disc, I printed out my own DVD cover, and wow, this is gorgeous. I actually can't remember where. Akatine 64. I don't know if I said it right. It says there. Sorry, it's not in focus. But yeah, this is what it looks like on my shelf. You've got Wormwood, Luke, Sarah, and Maria on the cover there. It looks really nice. And the orange colour is to link with the drink. I can't remember what the drink is called. Hopefully it says on the back. 1 second. And then there's the spine, if anyone's interested. Of course, it doesn't feature a doctor, so I don't have the doctor on the spine there. So, and obviously, Bubble Shock. It's called Bubble Shock. And here's the back, which kind of gives it away that it's not one of mine, that I didn't put this together. So, anyway, here is the covers that I got as a DVD. I'm not too sure. I don't think this is a very particularly popular one with Doctor Who fans. I believe that this one is mainly popular with the much more younger demographic, but for a much more adult audience like myself, who watched these when they were in their 20s and their 30s, or maybe in their 40s, who just, you know, are huge fans of Doctor Who in an adult sense of mind. I don't know if it's a particularly popular story. I think a lot of people might not even like it, but it's not particularly. My point is that this story isn't particularly known for being one of the strongest episodes of the series. So, on that remark, shall we dig into this story? The story revolves mainly around the character of Maria, who essentially becomes Sarah Jane's companion. She is moving house onto Bannerman Road, which is where the main series is focused on. She has just moved out from her parents' house. Not out her parents' house, but her parents have been divorced. So her father is moving into Bannerman Road, and she's basically living with him. And her mother, clearly there's this relationship issue there. The father seems to have no ill will. The parents don't seem to have any ill will, but they are going through a divorce. And the mother seems to be more focused on herself, more interested on her boyfriend, and more focused on getting Maria's father to get the check. And right off the bat, we get to see Maria's point of view. She becomes a very relatable character, and something which I think younger audiences can relate to. The idea of parents divorcing and have to force to move out into a new house with a new road and a new school is something that terrifies us, and a lot of people have, gone through it. It's just sadly something normal in a sense. But these characters get introduced to the mad, crazy woman who lives on the other side of the road. For you see, on Bannerman Road, on number 13, lives Sarah Jane Smith, a journalist that we all are familiar with. And right off the bat, she seems to be coming off as a very locked character, someone who doesn't really talk to strangers, someone who keeps to herself. At one point in the series, in the story, Maria's father actually tries to have a conversation with her, but Sarah Jane is just like, I'm sorry, I tend to work home. I hope there won't be any too much noise from you as you've just moved in, which is something very unlike Sarah Jane that we know. Sure, she is hard-hitting and she is tough and sturdy, but we've never seen Sarah Jane like this. And we wonder, why? Why is she? What has she got to hide? What is she concealing in her house of 13 Bannerman Road? And right off the bat, Maria is interested in her. She is just fascinated by her. And in fact, one night she gets woken up by purple lights from Sarah Jane's house, and she sneaks into Sarah Jane's garden, where she witnesses Sarah Jane talking to an alien who seems to be singing in a psychic form. Now, what's really interesting in this scene is the alien species. This is an Akatine, a race that have appeared before in Torchwood in the story Greeks Bearing Gifts. And just the idea that a race of aliens can be both presented as evil in one story and kind and gentle just expands the idea of the Doctor Who universe in such a way. I mean, it's just like human beings. There's evil human beings and there's good human beings. Torchwood just deals with the evil ones, and Sarah Jane mainly deals with the nice, kind ones. And that is something which I like, how separate they are. But it's also funny to note that an alien race which was once plaguing one of our main characters in one show and torturing her with her own sexuality and her own anxiety about how her friends think about her. In this story, though the story doesn't focus on this alien, from what we know, it just seems to be a harmless alien poet that befriends Sarah Jane Smith. I don't know why, I absolutely love that. And I also love the fact that there is an alien race that Sarah Jane and Torchwood share, but not Doctor Who itself. I don't know why, but that's just so cool to me. And it's only like a small little moment, and it basically opens the idea to Maria that aliens are a real life concept. she talks to her father about it later the next day, in which Maria's like, have you ever seen something and you didn't believe it and you couldn't imagine what you saw and you think you're going mad, but you can't because you did genuinely see it? But she gets no real answer from her father as she gets a knock on the door and she gets introduced to a character who quickly takes up a friend into her, mainly to use her as the new girl to kind of gain some sort of popularity. This is a character I want to talk about. This is Kelsey Hooper. Now, in terms of this story, she's kind of annoying, she's kind of a brat, and although we don't actually know why this would be her only televised appearance, the story seems to be teasing the fact that she will become a regular for the series. This would be her only appearance on screen. For you see, Kelsey Hooper somehow found her way in the really obscure, really just obsolete franchise, The Faction Paradox, the gold mine of obscure Doctor Who facts. And you read her Wikipedia page, it is some of the most hilariously stupid things. Essentially, after this story, Kelsey Hooper joins a cult of time-traveling worshippers who want to kill all the Time Lords. She also gets a boyfriend named Reese. Now that sounds fine, but it turns out Reese is this guy who wears priest-like costumes and has a face of smashed glass instead of any human features. Okay, and it turns out she actually joined Faction Paradox because she got fed up of her boyfriend and wanted to kill him. She also befriended a character called L-Level, T-Level, C-Level, something like that. No, L-Event or something like that. And just she's such a weird character, and she comes from this story. It's so bizarre, it's so strange, but in terms of this story, I don't want to really talk about her too much, because despite her being a prominent character, she is kind of one note. She's kind of the character who she focuses most as on herself. She's basically supposed to be a brat. She's supposed to be the self-absorbed child who worries about like when people text her, and she gets bored very easily, and she just goes on this bus trip and this factory just to get free drinks, in terms of pop drinks, not actual alcohol. But you kind of get that idea, and despite her being a prominent character, there's not really much to say about her, and she is clearly a dead weight in this story, because she's a prominent character in this, but she's not really interesting, and she's not really important in any sort of regard. She just has a lot of screen time. The actress who plays her does a good job at playing a bratty character, and I hope that she got to do a much more interesting role later down her career. But as for this story, I'm afraid she wasn't given a good enough character to show her off. And so she basically befriends Maria to basically show her around the ropes. You know, she's the new girl on the street, and she's going to be joining their school later on. And so she basically talks about this drink that everybody's been drinking, the cool hip drink, Bubble Shock, which is this soda factory that makes this pop, and they have a particular element in their soda which makes it so addictive to 98% of people, of the population, which they call Bane. And so Maria seems to be one of the 2% who actually don't like the drink, and she kind of is annoyed by the fact that she gets dragged into this. But at the moment, she has no friends. She has no, because all of her support has been taken away from her. There's a great scene in which she talks to her mum about how why did she have to move? All of her friends were in her old school. Why did she have to move to here with this new school? And her mother just seems very dismissive of her. And that that is a feeling which a lot of kids can relate to, that their parents kind of just dismay them, and it is kind of important here. The story also, because it is a Russell T Davies story, is heavily political. However, there's no real subtext here. It's mainly straight to the point, where it's a soda factory which had this addictive element which might be poisonous, or might have some sort of dangerous, but the government or the world doesn't seem to care, and it's up to our main characters to investigate, find out what's wrong, and stop it, which is a lot to do with real-life soda factories, in which, I mean, there's some documentaries about the Coke and Pepsi corporations, and the horrible things that they do. Like, anybody who doesn't know, like, who everybody thinks that Coke and Pepsi and all these companies are these gods who make just tons of money and make this like nice drink. Go watch any documentary about them. They are absolutely mental. Fanta was made by the Coke industry for Nazis. That is a fact. And it's also incredibly mental. But anyway. But Sarah Jane Smith kind of gets a waft of that Maria has go into this bubble factory. And so she goes in to investigate and sneaks in. We also learn that she has a sonic lipstick, a recurring device within the series. She tries to break in. However, she gets quickly caught, and she meets the owner of this corporation. Enter Miss Wormwood, one of the few recurring characters exclusive to the Sarah Jane mythos, and she is played by I'm trying to remember, Jenny Bond. Her name is something Bond. I know that. Now this character reminds me so much. I'm almost surprised that they didn't just say that they are the same character and cast the same person, but she reminds me a lot of Miss Foster from the Doctor Who story Partners in Crime. That kind of boss lady who constantly wears these posh suits with the skirts and is always standing up straight and has obviously the sinister plot, but she kind of is the most relatable one of her crew, of these alien races. We quickly learn that she is developing a sort of human individual. We kind of see it in shades at first, this kid that's been in some sort of life support system. Later on, this kid breaks out and befriends Maria after certain incidents. But Wormwood then meets Sarah Jane, and I remember how I had issues with Foster's characterization in the story that she was given. Here, it's kind of similar in the sense that her villainous portrayed as kind of one note. However, here, I feel like we have a story which does benefit from it. Not really benefit from it, but because there isn't that extra hints, or at least to a point where the doors were open, but the writers aren't too cluttered in. I feel like the character works a lot better here, even though they are, of course, different characters. That might be because of just the format, that this is a much more kid-friendly show. So a much more clear villain like this businesswoman who's so clearly the bad guy, does actually kind of work, because it's just the format of children's entertainment, and the fact that we automatically assume she's the villain means that the character can do these sinister and very in-character things right off the bat. I also like the discussion where clearly Sarah Jane knows that she's an alien and stuff, but Wormwood is trying to dismay her, and I think she kind of gets the idea that she is not fooling her. She knows for a fact that Sarah Jane isn't buying anything of it. But each character kind of play up the lie in the hope that they will fool the other one. And that works with this kind of character. It works here because because as an audience viewer, we know this. We've seen her with this archetype, with this child, which I believe she calls it the archetype, or the architect, or something like that. And so she and Sarah Jane have this this relationship here at the start. And I feel like another reason why this works is because of Sarah Jane. Elizabeth Sladen just seems to work better at portraying off these type of characters than the Doctor and Donna were in Partners in Crime. It just feels like here, who is a human character who is later on in her life and is seeming to thirst out adventure, is a much better foil for this kind of villain and this kind of character. And that's what I think is kind of interesting. Now, because Kelsey uses her phone, which this company is like, don't use your phone. It creates some disturbance in the alien base. We quickly learn that the base, this bubble shock factory, is run by a giant octopus-like creature with a massive eye in the ceiling. Am I the only one who thinks of Starro from the DC comics? It looks exactly like it. Come on. Do not say that it doesn't. It totally does. And we get this introduced. Now, one of the things that a lot of people really criticise this story for, and a lot of stories in the Sarah Jane Adventures, is the CGI work. These things are rendered horribly, and they're so clearly on a very low budget. But however, taking into mind that this is a very low budget, and you know, this is not the Doctor Who production, this is something far lower down the line, it still kind of looks horrible. But I feel like the character designs themselves, especially later on when we see a Bane child running around through Sarah Jane's house, do I feel like the effect, not the effect is good, but the design itself is a very interesting design, this kind of octopus inspired creature, and it makes us and it makes the audience viewer really have this in their minds, really strange aliens. It doesn't look anything remotely human, and it's only got like one eye, which has this kind of dent in the pupil. I just like it. I just like the design. I just wish the CGI work itself was rendered a bit better, and that's like a main criticism of it. But anyway, thanks to the disturbance of Kelsey Hooper's phone, the architect, this child that has been scanned by all these people to basically become like the perfect human, the architect to help the Bane find out what is making the 2% of people not drink their drinks, can get up and escape. Now, this child has no memory, he has no idea who he is. In fact, when he bumps into Maria, the first thing he does is just copy what she's saying, and as they run away, as Maria is looking for Kelsey, knowing that she is still in the base whilst the base is being evacuated. However, clearly Maria gets freaked out by the fact that the bubble shock factory are keeping a hell-halting child with amnesia, and so she hides into the girls' toilets, where they then bump into Sarah Jane, who had just survived an assassination attempt on her by one of the Bane's secretaries. We quickly learn that this thing on the ceiling that we saw earlier was the Bane, this creature which has all these offspring with these octopus people, which like our main villains. Wormwood and this other character are her children, the Bane children, and they also then produce Bane, these particles which actually turn out to be part of living Bane, converting humans into Bane, and that's what the drink is doing. It's converting people into Bane, and because Sarah Jane has gotten involved and and basically has made the Bane race basically panic, they basically move their plans forward so that they mind control all the people who are drinking bubble shock to try and shove people into drinking the rest of it. We get this absolutely lovely scene of Sarah Jane just talking down to this boy and just slowly learning about him as he's learning about himself. And Sarah Jane is kind of working out, like, who is this child? What is he? And there's this just lovely connection with him. And Elizabeth Sladen like, she was clearly a great choice to star in a child-friendly show. I also want to add how strange it is that Sarah Jane Smith was the character picked for a child friendly show. Don't get me wrong, it is great. It is a great idea and I love it. But Sarah Jane is a character from the 70s. Do you think that fans of her from the 70s would be watching this? Of course, the idea is that parents can watch this with their kids and they can recollect on their memories. But would it make more sense if you have the character which the younger or the older audiences remember from their childhood be the one that stars in the adult show? I don't know. But I am kind of glad that Sarah Jane Adventures was made the way it was. I love the scene in which the child is like, Sarah Jane is like, I made you some drink and some food. And the boy is just like, is that food and drink? Well, yes. Which one's which? And Sarah Jane uses a scanner to try and find out how old the boy is. And originally he thinks, my God, you're 3,000 years old. But then it clicks. It's not 3,000 years. It's 3 minutes. The child is 3 minutes old, and clearly that's some shady stuff. And Kelsey Hooper has her mind erased, so she doesn't remember seeing the Bane, and she basically tells the Banes where Sarah Jane lives, and so the male Bane child goes to Bannerman Road to drop Kelly off, but also to kill Sarah Jane, and we get our first real action scene. Kelsey goes to Maria's house. Maria realises the creatures are on Bannerman Road and traces after Sarah, who Sarah doesn't want Maria on her. We basically learn that Sarah Jane Smith has been doing this all by herself. She realises that people get hurt in her line of work, what she does, and she doesn't want any friends, any companion, shall we say, because she knows that they can get hurt, they can be harmed. This is a dangerous life she exists, but Maria pushes on because she's so interested, she's so fascinated, and also as well, she's just worried for Sarah Jane Smith. And we have this action scene with the Bane in the house, really cool stuff, until we get into the basement and we see one of the main settings of Sarah Jane. If the Doctor has the TARDIS and the Torchwood have the hub, Sarah Jane Smith has the attic. This elegant room of alien equipment and books, almost like a untidy library of sorts, and a small little museum. We also here learn what K9 has been doing. He's helping to solve a black hole that was opened up in Switzerland, but it's taken him away from Sarah Jane. He's been gone for what seemingly is a year. So this story takes place at least a year after the events of School Reunion. And so Sarah Jane has been lonely ever since, where Maria is basically like, you can trust us, you can help us. We will help you, we will keep you company. Sarah Jane reveals that she has an alien computer, Mr. Smith, played by Alex Armstrong, I believe it is. The guy who does the Pointless show. Him? Yeah, he voices Mr. Smith, this computer, who has a very prominent role later on in the series. And so Sarah Jane contacts the Bane, Wormwood, and Wormwood is basically like, I'm calling your bluff. I'm going to activate the bubble shock and turn everybody into mind control, where we see basically almost the world going around with the pop saying, drink this, which again, Russell T Davies, consumerism, he just hates stuff like this. It's just what he writes about. It's just that kind of thing that he does. The scene is, of course, extremely silly, incredibly goofy, and you can just imagine the actors playing these roles, having just a massive laugh. being zombie-like, going, drink this. It's goofy, it's silly, but as something for a kid's show, you can kind of get away with that. You know, kids have, one of the things the kids have an advantage over a much more older audiences is that they have a much more bigger expansion of disbelief of what they can accept as normal. And so Sarah Jane and the crew basically head back to the bubble shock factory to take down the Bane alien race as they've taken over the world. There's a great scene in which they basically get cornered. The gates on the front are closed. The gates on the back are covered with people trying to convert them to drink the drink. And it's only them and a bus in between these gates. And then it turns out that you see like Wormwood, and she's like, soon, Bane Mother, we will take over this world. We will consume everybody, and every human being will be under our... And you can hear like a noise in the background, and she just turns around and just goes, what the hell's that noise? Boom! As this massive bus pushes in and breaks in. It's here that Sarah Jane and Wormwood have their final interaction in this episode. It turns out, like, she tells what the child, what the architect is for, is that he is this blueprint for humanity who do not drink the Bane and uses that as a way to convert them. But however, as their plans are now moving forward, thanks to Sarah Jane's involvement, that is no longer necessary. And so turning on this device puts the child at extreme pain and seemingly starts killing him. Now Maria remembers how they weren't allowed phones earlier on, and how Kelsey's phone destroys, or at least harms them. And though she uses her phone, it's dangerous and it does harm the Bane, but not to any sort of dangerous effect. It just sort of annoys her, or at least is painful. It's a painful process. The phone signals, and they kind of laugh, and it's like, ha ha ha, your silly devices do not work. But then the child, he gets this device that Sarah Jane was showing Maria in the attic scene, which was actually a device that was given to her by the Akatine to contact her if she needed any help on poetry. And this child basically realizes that this device is basically a phone that contacts us through space. Basically, a phone which is 100 times more powerful. And so he uses the code of the base to try and send these signals, and which quickly destroys the Bane Mother. Wormwood, we see in the scene, she's going down an elevator, stating, I'm gonna get you, Sarah Jane. Soon you will regret this. As Sarah Jane, Maria, and the child run out the building, and the building explodes. Basically, Wormwood escaped, but the characters don't know it yet. This leads into a scene in which Maria sees her father, who was once converted by the bubble shock, and is now seeing this new life, this new world that she's experiencing, and she is so grateful for what she has now. And she has also made this massive friendship with Sarah Jane, and Sarah Jane takes her back to her house, and she has a much more nicer conversation with her father after the first time they interacted, where she was a bit more stuck up, she was a bit more closed off in terms of her personality, but now she has much more enthusiasm to meet new people, as now working with more people like Maria and this child has given her a newfound life, which will kick off, the series. And it's also here that Sarah Jane announces that the boy is her adopted son. She is going to look after him, and she will look after him in a way that she is his mother. And there's that mother-son dynamic between them. And the story ends with them having this really nice little moment where she's talking about the doctor and her memories of him. Oh, I forgot to mention, in the attic, there's a picture of Brigadier Alistair Lethbridge Stewart. That is just awesome. That's an awesome Easter egg there. For any classic Doctor Who fans watching this, I got a kick from looking at a little Easter egg. It doesn't take you out of the story, it's just like in the background. But when you notice it, it's like, oh yeah. She still has like fond memories of Brigadier. That's so cool. She basically announced that Mr. Smith has basically made these papers so that she's legally adopted this child as her son. All they need now is a name. Sarah Jane points out that if she ever had a son before, she would have named him Luke. And the story ends with them naming the child Luke. And he becomes the main prominent character through the series. So that's Invasion of the Bane. Overall, it's a pretty decent opener for the series. I can understand why it's not a particularly popular one. The story is very cliched. It's a story of this like corporation which is secretly feeding people this thing which will allow them to mind control stuff, and our characters investigate. It turns out they're aliens and it's all evil, and that pushes them further into this mind control situation. It's a plot line we've seen 100 times in movie, in TV. I don't know if Doctor Who's done it. I can't remember. I don't think they have. Oh wait, yeah, the Macra Terror is a very similar concept in a way. I'm trying to think of any others. There's probably loads, but right now I can't think of any. That's really bad. But it's a plot line that is very cliched, and a lot of films and TV shows have played out. And in that regard, it is kind of dull. Not all the characters are strong, and sometimes the story does kind of has a lot of pacing issues where it's just kind of waiting for the next big event in the narrative to come in. However, with some nice likeable characters, and to show where the series kicked off, I think that this is actually a pretty decent story, and I highly recommend it that you watch it. I think I'm 50-50 on it. I don't like it, I don't hate it. I'm just kind of meh. It's alright. I would watch it again, but I probably didn't think much of it. But the reason to watch this is Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith. She has just this magnetic quality about her in terms of her performance that is unrivaled by any other character in any Doctor Who story. And so to see where this series kicks off, I think this is actually a must-watch. So there you go, that's Invasion of the Bane. So join me next time when the Doctor finds himself in the company of old friends and old enemies, as he reunites with Martha Jones, as him, Donna and Martha team up with Unit to discover a plot revolving around one of the greatest potato races in the galaxy. So join me next time for The Poisonous Sky and the Sontaran Stratagem. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!